The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Senator John McCain has been fighting brain cancer for some time. We've known about it since July of 2017, I believe. And a few days ago, we heard that he had discontinued treatment for the glioblastoma. He has passed away 4:30 p.m. a couple of days ago at age 81. Survived not only by his immediate family, but also by his 106-year-old mother. An outpouring of mostly support from people on the political right, of course, also people on the political left. Despite being a Republican, McCain had many friends, both personally and even with some ideological crossover in the Democratic Party. And through John McCain, we can talk about his politics, but through John McCain, we really saw how not only does politics create strange bedfellows, but it also sometimes creates unusual enemies, or at least adversaries in some cases. John McCain had been at odds with Donald Trump for some time, Trump ridiculing McCain's military service, McCain, of course, a prisoner of war, saying he prefers soldiers who don't get captured, or heroes who don't get captured. And John McCain making it clear, according to a CNN report, that he does not want Donald Trump at his funeral. Donald Trump, regardless, still tweeting, quote, "My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you." So on the one hand, there was this very significant rift rhetorically between Trump and McCain. In the end, it's important to remember that when the rubber met the road, if you look at how frequently they voted in line with each other, John McCain did vote in line with Donald Trump's position 83% of the time. Now, that's arguably low compared to maybe most Republicans who are in the high 90s in lockstep with Donald Trump, but it is still someone who, for the most part, agreed with Donald Trump on the substance of the bills, if not on the rhetoric and the tone. So what can we glean from all of this? Putting aside the political differences with John McCain, and I had many differences with John McCain, he did meet a different minimum standard of decency and decorum that has been widely missing from the Republican Party. One notable moment was during the 2008 campaign against Barack Obama, when a clearly ignorant xenophobic woman in the audience told McCain she thinks Obama is an Arab. And McCain said, "No, he's not. We just disagree about politics." I'm going to play the clip for you. Now, of course, it would have been nicer for McCain to say, even if he were an Arab, that's not an argument, and that would be okay, and we'd still have to figure out who's right on policy. But still, this was an interesting moment John McCain was involved in.
I got to ask you a question. I do not I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you.
Asked how he wanted to be remembered, McCain said he served his country and not always right, made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of errors, but served his country, and I hope we could add, said McCain, honorably. So was John McCain a politician I agreed with? No, he was more or less a standard neoliberal war hawk. I still can't square that decision he made, the totally incompetent Sarah Palin being brought on as his running mate in 2008. Still can't understand that. And like most senators who are part of the system, McCain was responsible for countless deaths through his support of American policy interventions in other countries. But what can we say today? He did relate in a way that at least appeared to be much more genuine and authentic to his politics and to his statements. He actually did seem to have principles that he applied to his politics. I thought they were often incorrect, but they were principles. Will Trump be at McCain's funeral? Ultimately, it seems like the answer is no, and ultimately no one is going to remember that. Former President Obama and former President George W. Bush have both been asked to speak, which will have the double benefit of Obama number one, just being a really good person to do this, and of enraging Donald Trump, but it tells us so much about the state of politics in the United States today, where the current president, the same party as a notable senator who dies, isn't asked to participate, and a president from the opposite party is. We will have more for you later in the week about John McCain, but a couple of other notes related to John McCain first. As you know, as I mentioned, Donald Trump is not invited to speak at John McCain's funeral. Obviously, Obama, yes. George W. Bush, yes. This is sort of an interesting side story to this entire thing. We're now learning about the continued disgusting behavior by Donald Trump towards John McCain. The White House had put together a statement praising McCain and his life and his heroism. Chief of Staff John Kelly, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, other aides went to Trump and said, let's put out this statement. Let's praise his military service and do all the stuff we're expected to do. Call him a hero. Trump said, no statement. I'll post a tweet instead. And the statement that was drafted up was never published. A former spokesman for Trump's legal team and longtime Republican strategist named Mark Corallo straight up said, quote, it's atrocious. At a time like this, you would expect more of an American president when you're talking about the passing of a true American hero. This is what Republicans signed up for with Trump, period. Just imagine if a Democratic president had done this. But sadly, this isn't even the most vile thing Trump has said or done about McCain. Remember back during, I believe it was during the 2016 presidential campaign, Donald Trump said, he's not a war hero. He was a war hero because he got captured. I like people who weren't captured. This is the world within which we're operating. We had another controversy, if you want to call it that, this morning, as at midnight last night, the White House U.S. flag was raised from being at half-mast in tribute to John McCain. And immediately, why? Shouldn't it be longer? And then the defenders of Trump say, you know, if you're going to keep it longer than a day and a half, you need to have a special decree from the president. These are all distractions, but they do go towards characterizing this base level of discourse that we can't even expect from the office of the presidency. It's not even Trump personally at this point. It's the office of the presidency that has ridiculed and disrespected itself. And we've got, you know, it's Democrats and Republicans and independents and people who aren't even political. We all have to change it. And if you're sick of the policy, and you're sick of the rhetoric, and you're sick of the tone, whatever you're sick of, you've got to go out and change it. It is your responsibility, and what's going on is disgusting. One other, by the way, vile comment related to John McCain's death. Kelly Ward is a Republican candidate in Arizona, and she really likes Donald Trump. She's a committed Trumpist. She participated in a Facebook post started by one of her staffers over the weekend, suggesting that the announcement that John McCain was ending cancer treatment, basically an I'm dying soon message, was timed to take attention away from her campaign. Okay, let that sink in for a second. It started with a staffer of Kelly Ward's posting, quote, I wonder if it were just a coincidence that Senator McCain released his statement on the kickoff day of Kelly Ward's bus tour, or if it was a plan to take media attention off her campaign. I'm not saying it was on purpose, but it's quite interesting. And let's keep this up, because you could say, well, hold on a second, David, that's just a staffer. I'm sure as soon as the candidate caught wind of that, she immediately condemned it and said, delete this horrible, vile thing. No, Kelly Ward herself shows up in the comments and says, I think they wanted to have a particular narrative that they hope is negative to me. Any comment short of this is totally inappropriate, please delete it now, is wrong. Now, the comment has since been deleted from Facebook because of the uproar. The Ward campaign is blaming the media now, saying the problem wasn't the post, but the narrative that the media created about the post. She insinuated that John McCain stopped treatment to hurt her campaign, but says it's the fault of the media that this went bad. Even countless other Republicans are saying this is wildly inappropriate. Can you imagine? Yeah, I decided to announce my brain cancer had spread beyond treatment just to mess with your campaign, and then I died a day or two later just to make sure that I carried out the plan to destroy your campaign fully. This is truly ghastly and disgusting. And everybody who is associated with that campaign should head for the hills. It almost is beyond even rational explanation as to what might they have been thinking that would make this marginally less bad. I can't think of anything. Send me your thoughts if I'm missing it. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. We'll be back.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let me say thank you today to Philip Robinson, who's today's new David Pakman Show member of the day. We are mostly supported by members and patrons like Philip. Also, Amy Miner has been a member since 2013 and is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Philip, Amy, my sincere and total thanks. I'm flattered by the support of both new and longtime members. You can join them at www.joinpakman.com. Coupon code is available if you want to save 40%. The code is VOTESOON18. And you can also make a pledge on Patreon at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We've moved beyond the point where Donald Trump is claiming that there will be no investigation. We are past the point of Donald Trump saying that the investigation will end without charges or without guilty verdicts or without jail time. We are now at the point when Donald Trump has started to explain why it's just not a good idea to impeach him. Like, for example, by saying that the stock market will go down if we do impeach Trump. Once you feel the need to start making the case against your impeachment with anything other than saying I've done nothing impeachable, things are definitely not going well for you. And we have video from Donald Trump's hilarious interview with Ainsley Earhardt from Fox News, which is indistinguishable from a Saturday Night Live parody of such an interview. This is the same interview where Donald Trump said Michael Cohen pled guilty to things that aren't crimes, which is just a stunningly dumb thing to say. How did a room full of lawyers and judges and people who are familiar with the criminal code allow guilty pleas for things that aren't even crimes? It doesn't make any sense. So here is Trump making the case for why he should not be impeached. Take a listen to this.
76 days away from the midterms. Hard to believe. If the Democrats take back power, do you believe they will try to impeach you?
Well, you know, I guess it says something like high crimes and all. I don't know how you can impeach somebody who's done a great job. I'll tell you what, if I ever got impeached, I think the market would crash. I think everybody would be very poor, because without this thinking, you would see numbers that you wouldn't believe.
I think Trump's right that without his brain in the White House, we would see numbers that we've never seen before, but for the better. He's making the argument that the stock market would crash and everybody would be poor. Is that the best argument you can make for not impeaching him? Like, at least say Mike Pence would be worse, or most importantly, there's nothing I've done that is impeachable, but the market would go down and everyone would be poor. He later pulled out the Hillary Clinton card, saying we shouldn't impeach him because Hillary would have been even worse, which of course is neither here nor there, but it is part of that constant never-ending obsession. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama too, he mentioned. But the main point here is, does everybody realize how insane this is? Arguing that you shouldn't impeach people who are doing a good job is very, very different from saying you can't impeach people who are innocent of impeachable offenses. The right answer would be only, I've done nothing for which I could be impeached. Period. Next question. Stock market, people being poor, and what he's doing is trying to make the idea of impeaching him sort of like an imminent tragedy for the country, to try to dissuade people from wanting him impeached. He wants you to believe that he's so crucial to the basic functioning of the country that it would be devastating to everybody for him to no longer be president. And the other interesting aspect of mentioning the stock market is that the stock market's due for a downturn. I don't pretend to know when. Humans are notoriously bad at predicting when we're going to have a downturn. But historically, every upswing has had a downswing. We are getting very overdue. Could have been 2 to 3 years ago. It could be another 1, 2, 3, maybe more years. But it's going to happen because the run-up of the stock market has been bonkers. And no matter when it happens, Republicans are going to blame Democrats. Trump will blame an actual impeachment, a potential impeachment, the possibility of an impeachment, and he is already starting to set that up. Now, practically speaking, markets don't like uncertainty. Impeaching a president is big time uncertainty. But markets recover, and Pence will step in, and he would run the same type of Republican economic policy by and large. And over the long term, the course of the markets is going to be wholly unchanged unless Trump has actually done something that will so systemically damage the American economy that it would have a long-term impact on the markets. The impeachment itself is not going to be what has that long-term impact on the markets. I just don't even think we need to really talk about the impact on the markets. Going on Fox News and explaining why you shouldn't be impeached when you're a Republican president is already a sign about how poorly things are going. And we should all take note about how drastically the goalposts have moved from there will not be an investigation to it really wouldn't be good for anybody to impeach me, so we shouldn't actually do it. Let's talk about indictments next. 6 months ago, I would have said Jared Kushner was going to be the next sort of big inside player from the Trump organization, Trump campaign, Trump staff to get indicted. We did a poll last week on our YouTube channel, and 42% of our audience said that Donald Trump Jr. is going to be the next insider to get indicted in the Trump-Russia probe. We have now heard from Trump friend and confidant and prior guest on this program, Roger Stone. He has gone public with the claim, he is asserting that Donald Trump Jr. is about to get indicted. A Political Insider spoke to Roger Stone. That's a right-wing publication you may not be familiar with. Spoke to him over the weekend. And Roger Stone said, quote, "I predict based on excellent sourcing that the special counsel is going to charge Donald Trump Jr. with lying to the FBI. Notice they're not charging him for having an illegal meeting with a Russian at Trump Tower because there's nothing illegal about that meeting." There are about 10 interesting things about this that we could talk about. I want to just focus in on a couple of them today. First of all, who are Roger Stone's sources that would know if an indictment is coming for Donald Trump Jr.? Either that's a lie or he has some interesting people he's in touch with, which we would want to know more about. That's number one. Number two, Roger Stone's claim that Trump Jr. isn't getting indicted for the Trump-Russia meeting may be both accurate as of right now and highly deceptive. And what I mean by that is it may well be true that there isn't already an impending indictment or a sealed indictment for the meeting in Trump Tower that Donald Trump Jr. was involved in the planning of and participated in. We don't know that Don Jr. has extensively discussed that meeting, or that if he has, that Robert Mueller has finished his investigation into that meeting. Or to say it in a different way, Robert Mueller has been waiting on a lot of the family insiders, and he may merely not have gotten to a full investigation of Donald Trump's Jr.'s specific role and possible criminality surrounding that meeting. Almost every week, there's new information about that meeting. Who knew what and when did they know it? Who planned it? Who said what pre-meeting discussions were there? What follow-up discussions and actions took place? It would almost be surprising if Mueller was ready to recommend indictments for the meeting itself. What Mueller may already know, and this is if we believe that Roger Stone is telling the truth here, what Mueller may already know is that Don Jr. lied about the meeting or about something else, because what Stone is claiming is that the indictment would be for lying to investigators. But now let's get to the most important thing here. Whether it's true or not that Donald Trump Jr. is about to get indicted, why would Roger Stone go public with the allegation? Couple possibilities. At the top of the list is that Stone wants to goad Donald Trump into firing Robert Mueller as soon as possible, maybe to interfere with Roger Stone's own possible indictment. It is getting to sort of now or never for firing Mueller, because the indictments, the guilty pleas, the guilty verdicts, they are now in full swing. It's not going to be that much longer before it hits the family or the real insiders, if it's going to. So then the practical question is, let's say Roger Stone's lying. He doesn't really think Don Jr. is getting indicted, or if he thinks it, maybe he doesn't actually have specific inside information. If he succeeds at getting Trump in a panic to say, Don Jr. is getting indicted, I'm firing Mueller now, does it actually stop the indictment of Don Jr.? Because very often these indictments are written up ahead of time and sealed. And if that's the case, it's not even clear that firing Mueller would stop the indictment of Don Jr. As far as the merits of whether Don Jr. is likely to get indicted, remember when Steve Bannon said during an interview, quote, "They're going to crack Don Jr. like an egg on national TV." Others have also speculated that Don Jr. is in trouble. So it certainly would come at no surprise. In the end, there's likely so much going on with the investigation that none of these speculators actually know anything about. With George Papadopoulos, remember, it was months after his indictment and guilty plea that we found out about it. So anything could be happening. And the bottom line is that Stone's motives could involve deception to prevent him from ending up indicted by Robert Mueller's investigation. The content of it, the idea of Don Jr. getting indicted in and of itself, that's not surprising. We've been talking about a Don Jr. indictment for a while now, and even more over the last 2 to 3 weeks. But never underestimate what individuals are willing to go to for the purposes of self-preservation. That is what's motivating a lot of what we're seeing. Michael Cohen, the longtime love of Donald Trump, just their love for each other so strong and amazing and unbelievable. Supposedly, at a certain point, it was about Cohen's family and not his loyalty to his love, Donald Trump. And he did, presumably, although we don't yet know to what degree he's cooperating, what he and his attorneys determined is best for him to do. They are sort of scramming like rats trying to abandon a sinking ship at this point, and that's what's one of the highest motivators, self-preservation, for themselves and for the integrity of the families of a lot of these people. If you're not following The David Pakman Show on Instagram, you should. Go to at David Pakman Show on Instagram, behind the scenes pictures. You can ask me questions. All sorts of great stuff is happening there. At David Pakman Show on Instagram. You can also follow me at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
So today we're going to play for you my interview with Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan. I interviewed him at Netroots Nation in New Orleans, Louisiana, about 10 days ago. Very interesting guy. And here's, as I've reflected on this interview that we're about to play, here's the question I want you to think about as you listen to and watch this interview. Is Tim Ryan one of the good guys? Does he strike you as one of the Democrats in the House that is actually on the ball when it comes to the realities of how politics work, focusing on the right things, and informed in a way that is useful for the progressive move of the Democratic Party? Or do you think he's just another one of these corporate Democrats? Think about that as we check out this interview from Netroots Nation 2018 in New Orleans, Louisiana with Congressman Tim Ryan. I'm here with Congressman Tim Ryan, who is, like everybody, up for re-election because the elections are every 2 years. Do you think that this system of 2-year terms serves the voters the best? My sort of thought process on this for a while has been, you're campaigning a lot of the time, having to raise money a lot of the time just by virtue of it being a 2-year term. Think there might be a better way to arrange that, or do you think the voters are best served by this system?
Well, it's self-serving to say we should do 4-year terms. I do think in this environment that may be worth exploring, but the main problem is the money. I think we need to move to a public financed election system where each candidate gets a certain amount of money. I think we limit the amount of time so it's only a couple months like they do in Europe. And then you run hard, you knock on doors, you put a campaign together, the country talks about it. But if you don't get the money out, you're going to be spending 4 years raising money, and people just raise more money, and I think it'll eat up just the same amount of time.
I think there's sort of like 3 meta issues, and you name one of them right now, like whether you care about education or LGBT rights or whatever. You've got campaign finance, internet freedom, net neutrality, since that impacts coverage of whatever issue is important, and climate change, because if we destroy the planet, it's going to be hard to lobby for LGBT rights or whatever else. The people that are in power were elected by the system that we have, so fundamentally, it's not really in their interest to change that system, right? So like, how do we break that? Because you get somebody who says, I want to change the system, they get in with the system we have, that's the system that keeps them in. So how can we sort of shake that up?
Well, I think we need to organize around those principles, and so I think we talk about as a leading issue publicly financed elections. Like that will pull the rug out from the issue that we're facing with climate, because all of a sudden the moneyed interests and that are behind that won't have the influence over the political system anymore. And I think also finding a way to talk about climate in a way that surrounds growth in the economy. You know, wind and solar jobs are growing at 25 or 30% a year.
Sure.
So how do we talk about that in a way that says, hey, a portion of that growth has to go to distressed communities, has to go to old coal country, old steel country, old rubber country, like a lot of the areas that I represent in the South, so that people will feel a part of that new economy. We also need, when you can't talk about climate without talking about agriculture.
Sure.
And that regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, a big component of sequestering carbon and getting us healthy food, which will drive down healthcare costs. So these are all interconnected, as you know, but the money is the real impediment because it empowers forces that aren't always in it for the common good.
It seems like negative externality is sort of the key element that's missing from a lot of the talking point discussions about issues, like for example with healthcare for all, whether you support it or not, or single payer universal, the idea that I've got to pay for somebody else's healthcare. Well, you know, crime goes down when people have care. People make better decisions about what job they're going to take that actually aligns with their values when they don't have to stay in a job only to keep care. How can we, it's simple, but it's also complex when you have corporate media with 4-minute interview segments, right? So like, what's a way to start talking about that concept of negative externalities in a way that doesn't have like a glaze over effect?
Yeah, I think you just started that process. I talk about the Medicare for All, which I've been a co-sponsor of since 2007, and then we just recently started the Medicare for All caucus. This is a pro-business move. You know, the one thing I hear from businesses all over the country is healthcare. What do I hear from my friends in labor that they have to negotiate about all the time? Healthcare. Get that off the books. Let's provide some certainty for the next 5 or 10 years. You're going to know exactly what you're paying in healthcare. So the business could, if they wanted to negotiate or give their employees more, basically a supplemental, a Medicare Advantage style thing that they could negotiate so they can have more, great, fine, do that. But we want you focusing on jobs, job creation, pensions, put money in people's pensions, and wages, and getting wages up. And if we can grow the economy by talking about Medicare for All, so I think we take it head on. We don't sit here and just say, well, it'd be nice for you to have it, and there'll be less crime, and you know, I may not live in a neighborhood full of crime.
Sure.
You know, I may not care about you, frankly. I mean, I care about you, but right. You know, somebody may not. Hypothetically, right, allegedly. But if you're telling a business person this is going to be good for your business, good for your employees, good for your family, then that's a much better argument, more potent argument, which I would like to see us start making. I saw Pete D'Alessandro, who was Bernie's campaign person in Iowa, went and campaigned for him a little bit. He was talking about Medicare for All in the context of saving capitalism and growing the economy. And I think that's a really potent argument for us to make.
Taxes. So we have in the House, Democrats sort of, because of gerrymandering and the urban-rural divide, are at a mathematical disadvantage. In the Senate, just because you've noticed, in the Senate, you know, 1/3 of the seats are up each election, and it's not actually the best setup right now for Democrats. But hypothetically, taking control of one or both of those houses, would you support or introduce legislation to undo the changes to the tax code that Donald Trump's administration has put in place?
Yes, I would keep the middle class tax cuts and even find a way to maybe expand them. I'm on a bill with Ro Khanna to expand the earned income tax credit, which would put a lot of money back in the pockets of working class people. So I think that's what we would do. But we do need tax reform. You know, the corporate tax is a joke. I mean, it affects workers. And a fifth of them don't pay any tax at all. So we've got to find a whole new way to capture the income concentration that's happened in the United States. and that maybe there's a billionaire tax, obviously raise the top tax rate. But I think we've got to provide some relief to the middle class because they're still not getting ahead. We saw just recently wages went up, I think 2.9%. Inflation went up 3%.
Right.
So we're still not closing the gap on income inequality. It's actually growing. So we've got to provide tax relief, I think, in the short term for those folks. And I think getting rid of this joke of a tax, whatever it was not reform. It was basically supply side economics round 3.
Where would you put the top tax rate, and where would that bracket start?
I don't know. I mean, we'd have to. You can't. I don't think you can look at this as like one. It certainly has to go up.
Okay.
I mean, the main talking point was it should go back up to the Clinton era levels, which was almost 40.
Right.
So I think depending on what the other taxes you put in place, do you talk about a carbon tax? As we're dealing with climate change. Is that part of the package? Or what are you doing with barrels of oil? Is that something that you're going to do, which would all kind of fit together? So it's hard to say, but clearly the main economic issue we have today is the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. 80% of the people are struggling. They see the stock market go up. They see unemployment rates go down. Sure. They see GDP growth happen. That's for 20%. Those indicators don't mean anything to someone in Youngstown, Ohio at this point.
Right.
So you can't say what this level will be or that level will be without the whole context. But we've got to figure out how to get to this concentration of wealth and make the investments back into the country we need to make.
The sort of other side of this, or it's not even really the other side, but it's related, is debt and deficit.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot about sort of your positions over the years, and maybe some have changed on debt and deficit. I get a little concerned when I see Democrats talk about debt and deficit in the same terms that Republicans do, but merely with a sort of different perspective, because increasingly with modern monetary theory and sort of this understanding that deficit in and of itself isn't necessarily bad, depending on why we're increasing the deficit, if that's what we're doing, right? Do you think that the debt and deficit issue is a winning one for Democrats, or are they just playing into an argument that the right has framed in a way that it can't really be won on those terms?
I think it's an important issue because it's the responsible thing to do. I agree with you. Borrowing money like we do for our families. Unfortunately now, hopefully we can change this too and have tuition-free policies in the United States. But borrowing money to send your kid to school, for the most part, up until recently, pretty good investment. Taking a loan out to have a house, pretty good investment. Car, pretty good investment. Get back and forth to work. Those were investments that paid off.
Sure.
So borrowing money to rebuild the country, pretty good investment. So those are the kind of things we have to make. But at the end of the day, I'm for balancing the budget at some point. But when you have huge concentrations of wealth, and those people aren't, paying enough to help us balance the budget, that's the difference. You're right to identify that. The Republicans use it as a cynical ploy to say we got to balance the budget, so we're going to squeeze social programs. That's what they do.
Sure.
So they just borrowed $2.3 trillion for the new tax cut, and we turn around a week later and say, hey, we want to get money for SNAP, the supplemental nutrition.
Yeah.
What did they say? We don't have any money.
No, I get that, but even, when you say you want to balance the budget, why? What happens if you don't balance the budget?
Well,
because there's a lot of, hyperinflation. It's not totally clear that depending on why the deficit is going up, the deficit can go up $100 million, but if that $100 million goes into, for example, healthcare, which cuts down on employee absenteeism, which leads to higher wage growth, which the government then gets a piece of, it's not so cut and dry to me that just balancing the budget for its own sake is a winning talking point.
I don't mind borrowing some money, just like we do in our homes, if they're for good investments. But at the end of the day, big deficits like the ones we're going to have about $1 trillion deficit here in the next year, and it's going to run into the future.
Sure.
Adding $1 trillion and then paying interest on that is a problem. And then when you're paying interest on that and you borrowed the money from China, and China's taking the interest payments, and they're building islands and bases in Africa, and investing in additive manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, wind, solar, high-speed rail, and dislodging us from being economically competitive. That's another reason why you don't want to be borrowing money.
That seems like the stronger issue to me than balance for the sake of balance, right? It's specifically why it is when the deficit goes up because people who are mostly saving the money as opposed to spending it or getting a tax cut. That seems to be a stronger argument. But again, it's like in 4 to 6 minute corporate news interviews, you're just not going to get that sort of level of nuance.
You're not going to get anything.
You're not going to get anything. What do you make of the split that it definitely exists to some degree, but I'm curious to what degree you think it exists between this movement on the left to go towards democratic socialism as opposed to social democracy, to the extent people understand the difference. I've been talking a lot about, there's some confusion about those two terms. Of course, democratic socialism being more actual socialism, social democracy more the Swedish model. Is this a split on the left right now?
I'm hearing more about it, but I don't know enough to actually say it's a split. I mean, clearly the free enterprise system is broken right now. We've lost the protections that need to be in place on the environment, on workers, on pensions, on wages, and on all these things that we've had in place. Unions, weakening unions, which were the main counterbalance to the free enterprise system. But I still think that the free enterprise system for us in America, if it's fixed and well regulated and operating the way it should, with an appropriate, strong, robust government to fill in knock off the rough edges of the free enterprise system, I still think it's the best system for us in allocating resources, but also in innovation. We are a country of innovators and creators and entrepreneurs. The problem is all of that wealth has got stuck basically in 3 states. Venture capital money, 80% of it goes to 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. That's broken.
3 great states, by the way.
Phenomenal states. All blue. But, we need that investment in Youngstown, Ohio. So the system is broke. It's creating wealth. It's creating value. And we actually brought Silicon Valley, 13 venture capitalists from Silicon Valley on a bus tour in Youngstown, Akron, Detroit, Flint, and South Bend, Indiana. And what they said when they got to our areas, they said, there's things happening here that we didn't even know about. Innovations, creativity happening here that can lead to job creation. So the idea is this free enterprise can work, but the capital is now stuck in these 3 areas and in these wealthy pockets throughout the country and then concentrated to a larger degree. That's where you need strong public policy.
So that's social democracy. So if someone said, no, I actually think we need to socialize the means of production and eliminate private ownership of business and make that social, you would be against that, it sounds like.
Say that again?
So what you're advocating, fixing the free enterprise system, but keeping that's social democracy. If someone said, I want to socialize the means of production, that's not something you would be in favor of?
No, not at all.
Okay. 2018 midterms coming up. At this point, do you believe that in Ohio, not always a red state, but it's been a key state for Republicans when they've won at the national level, how much is Trump affecting races like yours or even more local races like state senates and legislatures? Is a Trump alignment helpful? Is it a hindrance at this point, or are the local races not really influenced by that?
It's super helpful in a Republican primary. We're seeing that all over. Even his tweets in Florida for the gubernatorial primary completely flipped the script there. All of a sudden, Trump's candidate took off. Not sure yet in a general. I think there's been a lot of softening, and we're going to see in the special election that's happening on Tuesday in just a northern suburb of Columbus, where our candidate, Danny O'Connor, is neck and neck now with a Republican in a district that Trump won by 11 points. It's John Kasich's old congressional district. So it's kind of a Rockefeller Republican area, a lot of immigrants from Somalia and Bangladesh in that area. They're very tolerant, a strong LGBTQ community, slightly right of center on probably some economic issues, higher income people, but tolerant. And I think they don't like the chaos, violates their Midwestern sensibilities. And the race baiting with LeBron James and any other black person, he can stand up and say, "Oh, look, they're dumb." It violates kind of who we are. And so I think we're going to see a shift. I really do, that we're going to have a good year. Have a good year.
Congressman Tim Ryan, hopefully good for you anyway in November. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This next story has sort of been forgotten because a so-called catch and kill contract was in place, and we'll talk about that and what that means. But we may be able to get the details of a child that Donald Trump fathered with a housekeeper at Trump World Tower. You might remember that a while back, a doorman at Trump World Tower named Dino Sayudin, or Sajudin, I'm not exactly sure how he pronounces his last name. The doorman supposedly had a story about Donald Trump fathering a housekeeper's child, but we didn't hear more about it because American Media Inc., also known as AMI, made a deal with the doorman to prevent him from being able to talk about it. And the reason that a love child or an illegitimate child, whichever term you prefer, I don't love some of these terms. They're certainly not the most politically correct terms, that's for sure. Some people would call it a child out of wedlock, although who likes the sound of that? In any case, the contract that the doorman signed specifically says, quote, source shall provide AMI with information regarding Donald Trump's illegitimate child. It now appears that the contract, which prevented the doorman from telling the story, is no longer in place or will soon be taken out of operation, and that he may soon be able to speak freely about this. His lawyer is now saying Mr. Sayudin hopes the truth will come out in the very near future. At this time, Donald Trump having an illegitimate child has not been independently confirmed. However, it would be very odd to include a reference to it in a private contract if it were bogus. But I want to get to the important thing. Why would it matter if Trump fathered a so-called illegitimate child? It's similar to why would it matter if Trump was regularly throwing around the N-word when talking about black people. I don't care about the child itself, if indeed it's a true story. What I do care about is Donald Trump's behavior as a bully and his use of hush money or contracts to silence people either directly or through his friends at companies like AMI. I care about the constant hypocrisy of his voters who claim he was the family values candidate despite the infidelity and now potentially a love child. Trump won, remember, the white evangelical Christian vote by a huge margin, and they are all hypocrites, or liars more likely, who don't actually care about so-called family values. I also do care about the kid, right? Because it's possible that this kid doesn't even know Trump is his dad, and he may be about to figure it out, and who knows what that's going to be like for him. Him or her, I guess we don't know the gender. As far as the truth of the story, we don't know. There are people at AMI who were involved in or at least knowledgeable about the hush contract. And at the time that it was signed, they were skeptical about the truth of the love child claim. But we know that this was a big enough deal that AMI and Trump wanted to get this deal done so that the doorman wouldn't tell the story. If it's completely unbelievable, they don't pay the money, right? Like they say, go ahead and say whatever you want. People are going to ignore you. If I said, I know of a Donald Trump love child, nobody's going to pay me money for that because there's no reason to think I would have specific knowledge of that. The fact that they signed the contract suggests at least some people in a position of power thought that it might be real. The doorman eventually took a polygraph test, which didn't indicate deception. But at this point, are polygraphs even of any value? I don't think that they are from what I know. Whether or not this story is true and is ultimately proven, there are sort of 4 to 6 major irons in the fire right now, any of which would make the next week a massive news week. And I'll be on vacation, by the way, which, listen, if you want massive news, just have me schedule a vacation, because without fail, every time I go on vacation, massive news breaks and I'm not able to cover it. But the good news for you is you'll be in good hands with multiple guest hosts covering, and then I will be joining you from a very special project I'll be working on at a university in France on the business of independent media that I'll be working on. But more about that in September. No more to say about it at this time. Longtime transphobic conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has, as you probably remember, recently been banned from all sorts of platforms online. This includes his channel on YouTube, podcast on Spotify, video posts on Facebook. I don't even remember the full list at this point. Something interesting happened last week, and I want to say something about it. During a live stream, Alex Jones will often cut to a camera that is like kind of over his shoulder, and it points almost straight down from above. And he'll sometimes show documents. He's known for saying, I've got the documents right here. And then the camera cuts to him and he shows documents that supposedly prove the existence of some harebrained conspiracy theory. And during a recent stream, a shot caught his phone, and something on the phone caught the attention of his viewers. And it turns out that it was transgender pornography, which which Alex Jones, talk about a Freudian slip, which Alex Jones, not Donald Trump, had presumably been watching at some prior point. And when I first saw this, I was unsure of whether it made sense to cover this story or not, because it's salacious and it's shocking, but it's actually more than that. And it's not about making fun of Alex Jones for his sexual proclivities, if that's what this is indicative of. A lot of people have started to say, after it leaked or was revealed that Alex Jones was into transgender porn, that it's as simple as he says that transgender is bad and he hates on transgender people on his show, but he's actually super turned on by transgender people and transgender sex. This is not just a story about that hypocrisy. This is being analyzed as merely a hypocritical Alex Jones who says one thing about trans people but thinks or feels another. I think that there's actually something really interesting here that's not just a tabloid story. Alex Jones fetishizes transgender people potentially because he does believe that it's bad and taboo in some way. Alex Jones might not be a hypocrite in the sense that he could genuinely believe that being transgender is bad and being turned on by transgender people is also bad or evil or whatever. It's hard to even know at this point the full list of things he said about trans people. And he may be turned on by that fact, the fact that he believes it to be whatever, right? Bad or taboo or supposedly unnatural, whatever the case may be. Think about all the so-called gay homophobes thing, right? And there are dozens and dozens of these prominent individuals who have been outspokenly anti-gay, but are gay themselves. And very often we say they are hypocrites. Some might be hypocrites. Some actually may not be, right? They may genuinely believe that homosexuality is bad, and they may be aware that they themselves are gay, and they can believe both simultaneously and think that it is a bad thing that they are gay. They may not just be pandering to raise money from the religious right, for example. And along these lines, Alex Jones can be outspokenly anti-trans, genuinely believe transgender is bad and nobody should be attracted to transgender people, but simultaneously be attracted to fantasies involving transgenderism because it's bad and it's taboo. This is why, and I think this is really important, if Alex Jones's sexual preferences are that he's attracted to trans women or to trans men or whoever, that's nothing to make fun of. I think most on the left do understand this. Sexual preferences aren't something to ridicule. The part to focus on would be, and this is bigger than Alex Jones, getting him and others to understand that the problem with the anti-trans preaching period, if there's hypocrisy, it's worse, and there might be or there might not be. But the problem is we need to stop targeting trans people and gay people or whoever. That would be the most important thing to glean from this. Do I care even 1% that Alex Jones seems to be turned on by transgender porn? I could not care less. It makes no difference to me what it is that Alex Jones is into. Send me your thoughts. I want to hear from you about this one. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. We spoke last week at length about conspiratorial thinking and conspiracy theories, and one caller apparently really confused about what it even means to talk about conspiracy theories and evidence. Take a listen to this.
Well, there's no possible way that Adolf Hitler could have killed 6 million Jews all by himself. He had to have had help. He had to have had many henchmen, right? But that would be a conspiracy. And there's no such thing as conspiracy So therefore, Adolf Hitler didn't kill 6 million Jews, because if he did, that would be a conspiracy. And we know there's no such thing as conspiracy.
Oh, come on.
And there's no such thing as the mafia. Because if there was a mafia, that would be a conspiracy. And there's no such thing as conspiracy.
All right. So listen, what the caller is arguing is that there are no actual crimes committed by more than one person working together, okay? You're taking one definition of conspiracy, which we discussed, which are explanations about phenomena in the world not supported by evidence, which are used to sort of craft an undertone or secret narrative of actors acting behind the scenes in shadowy ways. You're contrasting that definition of conspiracy with literally two people, quote, conspiring to commit a crime. The argument about Hitler is a really, quite frankly, stupid one, because you can't call the Holocaust a conspiracy theory, since we have both photographic, economic, historical, all types of evidence. And anytime that militaries are doing things, it's never just one person. Like if the definition of conspiracy theory was anytime more than one person does something, nothing any military has ever done would be true, because militaries by definition involve multiple people. So if you're trolling, okay, this caller, we know who this caller is. They're not typically just a straight up troll. They seem to genuinely believe this stuff. It's concerning, okay? And that's not what anybody, Tom Wood wasn't arguing that. I certainly wasn't arguing that about conspiracies. And the main point was belief despite a lack of evidence. Belief despite a lack of evidence. And also the lack of evidence counting as evidence for the conspiracy. That was a big part of it. Maybe go back and rewatch that interview. On today's bonus show, we will talk about Verizon allegedly throttling the unlimited data of a California fire department during wildfires that they were trying to fight. We will also talk, this is just weird, it seemed that Donald Trump showed up at a classroom with little kids and colored in an American flag incorrectly, which is just very, very strange for a number of different reasons. And then I will talk to you a little bit about the plan for the next couple of weeks and really for the next 3-4 weeks. A lot of exciting stuff. Producer Pat is not here today. We have producer Max here, who will be joining me on the bonus show. We will talk to him about whether he is in full panic mode about taking over for Pat. How big are Pat's shoes? Can they be filled? Or are Matt's feet bigger than Pat's? And he's actually going to need to bring in his own shoes, regardless of what shoes Pat would be wearing if he were here. Shoe filling analogies aside, we have a great bonus show planned for you today. You can access it by becoming a member at www.joinpacman.com. You can also access the bonus show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.